Welcome to Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is producer-engineer Jack Miele. But first, streaming services are making more money, and it's on the backs of artists and songwriters. Yeah, the figures are in from last year, and streaming grew by about 12%. Now, 67% of their income was paid to labels, with streaming services keeping about a little under 33%. Now, keep in mind that the average artist deal is 25% of what the label collects. If you're a superstar, you might get up to 50%, but most artists get 25%. So, all that being said, the streaming services kept about 1.1% more than they did the year before. And you think, okay, 1.1%, that doesn't sound like much. Yeah, but there's so much money being pulled in that it's $108 million that didn't go to artists and bands and songwriters. That's a big deal. And it's being swept under the rug for the most part. So why did this happen? Well, in 2017, Spotify complained to the record labels that it wasn't making enough money and it needed what they called margin relief. So what all the record labels, major and indie, what they did was they cut Spotify a special deal. And they basically cut down what they'd take from 55% to 52% of the prorated net revenue. Now, don't get too hung up on that because that goes deep into the weeds of how all this is figured out. So, what makes this an even bigger deal is the fact that last month the Copyright Royalty Board raised songwriter royalties 44% over the next 5 years. So songwriters have been complaining for a long time that they're not making much from streaming revenue. They get about a tenth of what an artist gets. So this is a pretty welcome thing to them, and it's not a huge amount of money when it's all said and done. But the only streaming service that went for this was Apple Music, and everybody else said they were going to appeal the ruling. This is Spotify, Google, Pandora, and Amazon. They're all appealing. So no one has quite figured this out yet, that all these companies actually made more money last year on the backs of artists and record labels and bands and songwriters, and yet they're trying to keep even more money by appealing this increase in songwriter royalties. Hopefully people will figure this out soon and you'll see even more of an outcry than we're seeing now. Already there's a big backlash that's happening against Spotify, especially from a number of major artists. So I think what you're going to see in the coming days and weeks is a bigger backlash even still. And this is all because of something called margin relief. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. Don't forget about my online courses on mixing, production, branding, and music business success at BobbyOwsinskiCourses.com. Also, get an expert analysis and objective opinion of your songs and mixes as a member of my Hitmakers Club. Go to HitmakersClub.com to learn more. Now, in the world of audio, there's something new that's coming to your concert hall, and it's called beamforming audio. Now, beamforming has been used in a lot of different areas in the past, but never audio. And we're seeing it in the brand new Madison Square Garden Sphere Arena in Las Vegas. This is going to open next year in 2020, and they're using beamforming audio. Now, why? Okay, first of all, beamforming audio came from Philips Research in 2012. That's when they got the patent. And what it is right now we're using an array of loudspeakers for concert sound reinforcement. And what happens is we have pretty equal coverage, but it's not great. So in other words, if you're sitting in the front, it's usually a whole lot louder than if you're sitting in the middle or the back, even though you may have distributed speakers all over. It's still not even, and there are places where you're not hearing the frequency response as you'd like. Well, beamforming audio supposedly takes care of that. And what it does is it delays the audio and it plays it at different volumes and it uses cancellation effects so that no matter where you are in the arena, you hear exactly the same thing. Now, like I said before, this is already being used. One of the devices that's pretty popular that's out there that you might have that uses beamforming is the Apple HomePod. And Apple actually got its own patent on this a few years ago. But there's a lot of other technologies that have been using beamforming for a long, long time. Radar, for instance, sonar, seismology, wireless radio, radio astronomy, biomedicine, they all use beamforming. And the problem was that it was so expensive to use in audio that they couldn't really do it until now. Now the cost of microprocessors has come down to such a degree that now the processing can be pretty intense and still could be relatively inexpensive. So look for beamforming audio at an arena near you, although the very first one is going to be that MSG Sphere in Las Vegas, which should be really interesting. Again, one of the things that you'll find is it's shaped like a big round sphere. So that's pretty cool in itself. So look for that to happen very soon. My guest today is producer-engineer Jack Miele, who's won a Grammy, Emmy, 4 Telly Awards, and 2 Global Music Awards. Based in New Orleans, Jack has a wide range of studio credits that include Rod Stewart, The Roots, Beyonce, Aloe Blacc, and the Zac Brown Band, among many others. As a composer, Jack's work has been featured on TV shows like American Horror Story, Anthony Bourdain's The Layover, and Toddlers and Tiaras, among others, and his work has been used in commercials for Mercedes, IBT Clothing, and Mountain Dew, also among many others. In the interview, we talked about the state of recording in New Orleans, how musicians learn on the job there, the unique ways that musicians get paid, recording the tape, and much more. I spoke with Jack from a studio in New Orleans. Tell me how you get into this business. I know you're a musician first and foremost, but tell me about that.
Yeah, I got into it. I mean, I've been doing it. Well, it's funny when you say this business. I actually originally got into it, like you said, as a musician. I got into it when I was 15, and basically started playing gigs. You know, just learned how to play guitar and drums and bass, and got in a bunch of bands and started playing. And as far as the engineering, producing end of things, it was more of a sort of a means to an end. I've said this before, that nothing quite, it's something that's built out of necessity. So, nothing makes motivation like the need for something, and my band, needed a recording and nobody else wanted to do it. Or I always would go to the studio and walk out and it would never sound the way I heard it in my head. And so you start to pick it up like that. You start to watch what's happening. And I started to buy gear when I've always had a penchant for gadgetry, and I love gear and guitars. And I was sort of one of those guys. And my grandfather used to, he was an electrician. He owned his own TV and radio repair shop. So as a kid, I used to see this radio repair shop and all these tubes and all this old hi-fi equipment and stuff, and it was just fascinating to me. And I was always sort of a record audiophile guy, who wanted to. And I didn't know anything about what sounded good and what didn't sound good. I just know that I loved music, and I would love putting the record on the turntable and, placing the needle down by hand. And, so I think the love of that sort of translated into what became making those same records that I loved playing all those years,
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a suburb of New Orleans called Metairie. It's right on. I grew up less than a mile from the New Orleans line, So, I mean, I grew up in New Orleans, I mean, my house is 7 streets away from the border between Metairie and New Orleans, right by the 17th Street Canal. So I grew up in a suburb called Metairie and went to school there, was born and raised there, and, grew up with all that music and all that culture around me. I just recently bought a house north of the city, about 40 miles north of the city. So I commute, and I still have a house in Metairie, but I commute every day when I'm up here to the studio, because my studio is in the heart of the city. It's right in the Garden District.
Well, if you started at 15, which is pretty young, but considering where you're at, it makes perfect sense. because there's so much music and so many gigs and everything happening down there.
Oh man, you'll have to excuse me if I'm stuffed up.
Yeah.
When I tell you that I started, my first paying gig was when I was 15. That was my first professional paying gig. And when I tell you that when I was young, I mean, I was grinding it out. Like I was really always known as a guitar player, writer. I was a composer. And that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to either be in the biggest band on earth, I wanted to be the guitar player for Kiss or something, or I wanted to be, Bernard Herrmann, or Danny Elfman or somebody like that. Like I wanted to write for movies because I'm a huge cinemaphile. I love movies. So what I did was I actually, when I was young, I went to school for music, but I basically took every course. I went for jazz performance, and I took every course I could until all I had left was math and English, and then I dropped out. But at that time, when I dropped out of college, I was playing on Bourbon Street 3 nights a week. I had my band that I'm still in today, called the Molly Ringwalds. We're like a touring 80s tribute band. But we do really well. It's very Vegas in style. It's a big, almost like the Blue Man Group or something. So I was doing Bourbon Street 3 nights a week. I was doing the Mollies on the weekends because I was doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday on Bourbon Street. Then I would do Friday, Saturday with the Mollies. And then I had a job working for a software company called JRL Enterprises. And I would get paid a lot of money to sit at home and write music per hour. So every week it wasn't to me, it was a lot of money. It was like, I think I was getting paid $35 an hour or something. But when you're 21 and, you're basically a kid, to get paid that much money to sit at home and write music like I'd be doing anyway, it was unbelievable. So basically I had all this money and I didn't know what to do with it at that age, because as kids do,
Yeah.
of course we're not going to save it. What's saving it? So you go out and you start buying gear. And that's basically what happened, is that as I made money, I would take that money and I would instantly buy gear. And I didn't even know what I was buying. I remember a microphone that you're using, the SM7, I remember buying one of those, before I even knew really what it was good for. I just knew that everyone had one, so I bought it, and now I still have that exact same mic, the one I bought when I was 21, and I use it for, everything, everything from vocals to snare drum,
Sure.
so yeah, it's that's sort of how I came up. And I didn't really do my first record until it was for the Mollies. Once again, the band needed a Christmas single to be on this compilation record. We didn't want to buy the studio time, and I did it on one of those. It's outdated now, but one of those Yamaha mini disc 4-tracks.
Wow.
Right? Yes, totally. And I still have it, by the way, but it's like totally out of date format. It's like doing it on Laserdisc or something. I did it on one of those, and it came out. I can't even listen to it now, but I thought it came out great. And I remember I locked myself in my apartment for the entire weekend working on this one song, and that I only bought that 4-track so that I could write music for the software company. That's why I bought it, and then so. It's sort of like, okay, well, I know a little bit about recording because I have this job, so I'll do it, So I basically did it and mixed it, and it came out, and it was just all downhill after that. I started buying. I remember, like, why can't I buy an 8-at rig? Because at the time, 8-ats were just going out. Like Pro Tools Digio 1 had just come out. So I've always been a big proponent of buying gear one tier back, so that you don't pay the ridiculous amount of money for certain stuff, especially stuff like that is going to be extinct, like a computer. Like I never buy the latest, greatest computer. I always buy one generation back, so you don't pay $4,000 for this computer that's going to be worth $40 in 8 years.
Yeah.
Because a computer, it's like an ice sculpture. I mean, you buy it and it's beautiful and it's instantly melting. And in 8 years, it's just going to be a little puddle of crap, So that's what I did. I started buying 8-app rigs, and I started recording everybody I knew for free, just to get the experience of trying to do it, experimenting. And boy, was it a hard learning curve. I mean, it took years and revelations and a lot of help from people who were better than me, to get to that point.
That's the way it usually works.
Yeah. I mean, there are a certain number of guys who, man, just their phone was just on speed dial. And, I pretty much owe, 75% of what I know to those guys because they were so forthright with information. And so I try to do that too. I mean, I can't tell you, I get blown up so much, people asking questions. What do you think of this? How do you do this? What is a good EQ for a kick drum? What's whatever, it's so, and I never ever tell people no. I always just answer the question and try to be helpful.
Yeah. It's something that I find too. When I wrote my first book, Mixing Engineer's Handbook, I knew all the best mixers in town. And I was surprised because I went to them all and I asked them questions. Well, how do you do what you do? How do you do this? How do you do that? And all of them were very open about what they did. And I asked somebody, aren't you afraid about giving away some secrets? And the answer was, no, because nobody does it like me anyway.
Right. And I cannot stress this. All right. So because I run one of the bigger studios in town, right?
Yeah.
So because New Orleans isn't it's not LA, so it's not or Nashville. It's not one of these places where there's a huge studio in every corner, and really, Nashville is like that, but LA is even starting. A lot of the big studios are starting to close, but there's only maybe 3 or 4 big studios in town, and I'm one of those. And I can't tell you how many interns I get who come from recording school.
Yeah.
These guys graduate with a diploma saying that they're certified by, some ether in the air to be an engineer. And it's unbelievable how much they don't know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I feel the same way that the guys that you interviewed feels like, because it's about your ears. Everything you need is right here. And I just can't. I asked a kid one time who was he had graduated from one of the major conservatories, and I won't name any names, but it's one of the big ones. And I asked him, I said, how many critical listening classes did you guys take? And he said none. He absolutely zero. I was like, how do you diagnose problems? How do you listen to something and go, wow, there's way too much compression on that snare drum. It sounds like a piece of loose leaf paper. It's like, or there's, this mix is so brick walled that you can't, there's no dynamics in the mix whatsoever. There's no, there's all sorts of things. Or, everybody like, why is Fleetwood Mac Rumors a great stellar sounding recording? Why is Eye in the Sky by Alan Parsons Project a stellar recording? Why are these, why do those recordings, stack up against these newer recordings? What's different about them? Why? So it's unbelievable that I remember sitting down. This is a guy who it was a young kid. He wanted to be a rock producer. He was young. He's 19 or something. And I said something about Appetite for Destruction, and he didn't know what I was talking about.
Wow.
And I was like, I said, how can you not know one of the greatest rock records of the modern era? I mean, it's like, what say what you will about Guns N' Roses, but it's undeniable that record is, you can hear the aggression on that record. The Cult Electric, like all those kind of records have these great sonics that you're like, man, how can you not know about these records? And they don't do the research. And that's what's amazing.
It's interesting. One of the things that I lament is the fact that there are fewer and fewer big studios. Actually, it's kind of settled down. We're not seeing many of them close anymore, but there are fewer of them that there used to be. So there are fewer positions for assistants. And one of the great things about being an assistant in the studio system was the fact that you got a reference point, and this goes to your critical listening statement, where you heard what's good, you heard what's bad, you heard what was great. And once you got that in your head, you had it forever. You had that reference point. And that's the problem when you're not exposed to that. You don't have that reference point yet, and it's really difficult to get in your own, as you know.
Right. I am absolutely blown away by, and like I said, I'm not looking to rag on the, millennials or anything. I'm just saying that I'm blown away at how little listening people do. Like they're, at least from my point of view, like when I talk to people, like, they're like when I tell you that every day when I come home after 10 hours of being in the studio listening to music, I come home and I have like a killer audiophile, like hi-fi, rig at my house, and I listen to music when I get home. And I put it on and I marvel at how great some of these recordings are, and I just enjoy it as a listener, but I'm absorbing, and that's one of the things that people ask me all the time is, how do you know so many songs, like on guitar? Like, it's because I sat down and I listened, and once you get to a certain level of playing, I mean, you can hear the changes. Like I don't need to sit there and learn it anymore. The changes are in my head, and I can hear where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that you had to learn if you were going to play on Bourbon Street, because some nights you play 8-9 hours straight. You would do 8 or 9 what's called sets, and a set is 45 minutes with a 15-minute break.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes you would do 3 sets in a row. So you do 3 sets of 45, and then you would take 30-minute break.
Yeah.
But when you do that, people would shout stuff. I mean, the band leader would shout out a song, and God help you if you didn't know it, you just had to play. You had to go, what key is this in? And you go, it's in A, or it's in B flat, or whatever. And then you go, okay, and you just you learn how to hear the changes, and so many guys, it's a dying art, but so many guys are great at doing that down there.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because New Orleans just has the most unique musical scene. And the musicians in Louisiana in general that I've found are a step above everybody in terms of feel, if nothing else. There's something that's undeniable. Whether they have major technique, and most of them do that I've found, but whether you have it or not, there's a feel that makes up for any deficiencies that you might have.
They're probably more deficient in technique and more proficient in like you said, feel. But this is a town that has, without a doubt, the best drummers of any city in America. Like I would put the drummers of New Orleans up against any city in America because of the pocket. Yep. The pocket is so deep on some of these drummers, and basically drummers and B3 players, the best in the world. So now it's funny, guitar players, hit and miss. So I mean, definitely some of the funkiest guitar players, but I find that they're more hit and miss, especially when I'm like hiring cats, for the studio. But there are some really great ones, amazing ones. But I feel like the drummers are growing on trees. It's almost like you can't, even the drummers who can't get a gig are amazing.
Wow.
So it's really, it's insane.
What's the gigging scene like there now? Has it changed at all? Or it used to be so vital. There was so many gigs around. Is it still the same?
Yeah. All right. So this is a semi-loaded question. So the gig scene down here, there are tons of gigs. It just depends on whether or not you want to make money. Yes, there are a ton of gigs, but there are only a compartmentalized amount that really yield some real money. When you go on Bourbon Street and you get into one of the bands down there, you can make a lot of money quick. And when I say a lot of money, I don't necessarily know what people consider to be a lot of money, but I will humor you with some numbers. So you might get paid $35 or so per set on Bourbon Street. So it's for a 45-minute set, you get paid $35 plus tips. So so at the end of a night, if you do 8 sets, so it's 8 times 35 plus whatever the tips are. So you can walk away at the end of a night with $200 or $300, and then if you do that 4 days a week, it's about $1,000, $1,200 a week. So it's not bad. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, it's like you're talking about $52,000 a year to be a musician.
Most musicians would jump at that,
right? But here's the but. The but is there is no real artistic. There's nothing as an artist to be excited about. I mean, you will play Sweet Home Alabama and Me and Bobby McGee 5 times a night, and so I equate it almost to being on a cruise ship.
Funny you should bring that up.
Yeah, it's sort of like that, Now you go down a little bit to Frenchman, and Frenchman Street is like the new Bourbon Street. It's all the younger, hipper, which I don't even really agree with that, but it's more of the hipsters, right? It's like the younger, it's mostly younger imports, meaning it's all the kids who got stars in their eyes and want to come to New Orleans to make it as a musician, and they get here and they get a gig on Bourbon Street. I'm sorry, on Frenchman Street, excuse me. And but Frenchman Street, man, I actually have friends who are now doing very well, thank God. But they were horn players that they would go down there for 5, 6, 7 hours and play, and they walk away with $30. Yeah. And I'm like, man, how get in this guy, had a kid, and I'm like, how you do this? How can you do this? It's such a colossal waste of time and the gig that he got, really ended up not being from anybody seeing him at all. Now you make a lot of friends, but when I tell you that the saturation point is so crazy down there, and the Frenchman Street crowd sort of snubs their nose at the Bourbon Street crowd, and the Bourbon Street crowd they have guys on there that I call, lifers. I mean, they basically are, I know guys seriously that have been down there for 30 years, and, they still do it. There's no retirement 401k plans, in place. So, but the Frenchman Street crowd, you'll hear some great music, some fabulous music. And I think that the problem is that the bars tend to have this mentality that they are doing the musicians a favor by letting them play. And it's the most slanted viewpoint I can even think of. I mean, without the musicians, there is no club, and the problem is that even when certain pockets of musicians take a stand and say, we're not going to play for less than this amount of money, there's always some kid who just got to town who comes in and says, I'll do it for that amount of money. And so there's no union. How in Nashville, the union's huge. Everybody's unionized. It just doesn't exist here. Yeah. It's it exists, but it doesn't exist. I don't know. I can name 3 musicians off the top of my head that I know out of the thousands that are in the union in New Orleans.
Let's talk about your studio for a second and what you do. Considering that you're right in the middle of town, what kind of music do you generally record?
I've done everything from rap to hard rock to I was the music producer for American Horror Story. I produced Blues Travelers last record, actually 2 records ago now. They actually had another one come out since. I've done everything from big recordings like Rod Stewart and Zac Brown Band and stuff like that to just local guys. Like right now, I just finished working on a couple of young bands 3 really impressive projects that I'd like to give a shout out to. One is a band called the Iceman Special, which they're getting a lot of traction lately. And they're sort of like a prog rocky kind of band, but almost like a like they're gonna kill it in that sort of widespread panic type of festival kind of crew. They're almost like Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd or something, or it's but rock. It's really it's very interesting. So I just did their first. They cut 2 records simultaneously and released them separately. So I produced, engineered, and mixed all of those, and I even mastered one of them. And then the other one was Tiffany Pollack and Eric Johansson. It's a blues rock album that just came out on the 15th of this month, and is doing very well. The reviews are coming in, and it's stellar. Couldn't be happier about it. So that record is doing really well. And then there's a band called Sinclair with a C, Cinclare, that they did an EP with me, and they sound like a cross between like the Shins and the Beach Boys or something. Like they're killer harmonies, 3-piece band, a real thoughtful songs, songwriter kind of stuff. Their record has not yet been released, but it will be very soon.
Jack, I'm curious. So I know you do a lot of high-level acts, and they're used to recording all over, and they have their way of doing things. That being said, if you get a local artist or a local band in, do they like to record all live together? Is there a lot of that? Like in Nashville, for instance, where you get the crew in, you get 9 people, they all play together, and it sounds great. But it doesn't happen like that at other places. But considering the level of musicianship, does that happen?
It depends. It depends on the act.
Yeah.
Like the Iceman special, they're a 5-piece band. 5-piece? I think they're a 4-piece band. They did 19 songs in 2 days.
Wow.
And it was, when I talk about the way that I produced it, I said, I don't want to do a bunch of crap in post. I said, I want to try and capture the way the band sounds. If there's some sort of delay or reverb or crazy effect that you use on your guitar live, I want it played that way. So there's actually playing, even the solos were done live. Wow. Switching pedals, basically I want you to go play a gig, and we did very, very few overdubs.
I love it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was great. And the record, you'd never know it because the record sounds produced. It doesn't sound like some live in the studio thing. It sounds like a produced record. So now the Sinclair record and the Eric and Tiffany record will do like rhythm section stuff. Me and my producing partner, Brent Arseman, him and I basically became the band for that Eric and Tiffany thing. We had a band cut half the record, and then for budget concerns, we couldn't afford to hire him again. So we said, well, we'll just be the band. I got an intern to hit the record button, and I played bass, and Brent played drums, and Eric played guitar. We did trio simultaneously. Then Brent is a killer B3 player and piano player. So he went back and put B3 and piano and everything, and I put extra guitar, and even the vocals were cut live. So you try to get as much as you can because you're trying to create a moment. But then, I get hired a lot of times for artists that aren't, the best live, so I need to try and bring, the best out of them that I can. And I understand that in some cases that talent that's within them isn't going to shine if I just throw them to the wolves. I have to sort of pull it out of them, sometimes one line at a time, and it just depends on who the artist is.
Yes.
So that's a roundabout of answering your question.
You have an analog tape machine, don't you?
Yeah, 24-track Otari MTR 90 Mark II. I even have the all the time. I just scored on eBay. Somebody was selling for $500 a complete placement head for it that looked like it had never been used. Like the heads looked perfect on it. So I bought a secondary head stack in case one I have goes out. But I use it all the time. I bought it from a church in Nashville. And those things, man, the price on them is going up so much. Like all my friends make fun of me because I'm like the king of like finding these deals Well, I don't like. I bought that machine for $1,800, and it is totally worked. And there was I did buy a new remote, but I found a remote for $150.
Huh.
And so it's like under $2,000, and I had a great working tape machine. I run it 30 IPS, $499 because I don't have noise reduction. So the machine sounds great. I also have one of those 16-track Fostex. Can't remember what it's.
I remember it.
Yeah, it's like the E something E16, so it's 16-track 1-inch is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I have one of those that I'll use like if we're doing like more of like an indie thing. It's a darker sounding machine. So if I have like an indie project or something I want to sound a little grittier, I'll use that. I also have the pro version of the Otari 2-track. It's the MTR 10.
Yeah,
I think it's a 1/4-inch 2-track designed for mix down and broadcast. I found it in the back of somebody's garage for $200. It worked. So the only thing that was wrong with it was the counter didn't work. It would just stay at 0 forever. It turned out to be a cold solder joint.
Huh.
So just re-soldered this thing, and the counter started working, and all of a sudden the whole thing just came to life.
Wow.
I was like, man, I can't. The heads looked like they were brand new. Couldn't believe it.
Well, when you're recording, are you recording onto tape and then laying it back to Pro Tools, or through the machine, or how are you doing it?
So I use a daisy chain process. So what I'll do is it'll go from the mic into the mic pre, out of the mic pre, into the tape machine, out of the tape machine into Pro Tools. And I'll run the tape machine and input so that Pro Tools is capturing just the through. It's not actually capturing off the repro head.
Yeah.
So I'll hit record on the tape machine and record on Pro Tools. That way, if the tape machine blows up, I still have the safety copy in Pro Tools. And then I'll playlist the whole thing. Like I'll make a new playlist for the whole thing, and I'll rewind the tape and reprint into the off the tape. I think on $4.99 you get about 16.5 minutes or so off the tape. So I'll run it at 30 IPS. So I we'll do 3 takes of a song, and then we'll take a 15-minute break and we'll print, and then everybody will go back in and do it. So it takes a little bit longer, but it's really for bass, drums, and rhythm guitar. It's so worth it. I can't even describe. It's just so worth it.
I did an analog project 4 or 5 years ago. Last one I did at the artist's request, and really it was a pain because, first of all, finding tape wasn't as easy as we thought, even in Los Angeles. And then the second thing was, you get the band going. Okay, we got a 5-minute song. Oh, we got 4 minutes of tape left. So you got to rewind and, go through the whole thing. And it takes momentum away. They wouldn't stay all analog. So we didn't go to Pro Tools until the very end. But it was, okay, let's do another vocal take. Oh, wait, we have no more tracks, So a lot of it was the fact that not doing it that often anymore, there were some limitations that I kind of forgot about.
The way that I do it, I came from a tape world.
Yeah, me too.
When I was 19 and interning in a studio, they had a Studer. It was an Eve and a Studer,
Yeah.
And there are some limitations, like punching is a pain in the ass. Yeah. It's so funny because like Pro Tools guys, when they learn on Pro Tools, it's so funny to watch them try to do a tape punch, because they'll be great at punching in, but they don't remember to punch out.
Yeah, you're right.
They'll punch in and go, awesome. I'm like, yeah, but you just erased the next line.
Yeah,
because they forgot to punch out. So it's pretty funny. But what I try to do is I use it almost like a glorified plugin now. I basically get it into the tape, get it on the Pro Tools, and then turn the tape machine off. We don't go as far as you did 4 or 5 years ago, at least with my process now. I find that I want to get the maximum benefits of each medium, and the maximum benefit of tape is the way it sounds. So you get it, and then you use the benefits of the Pro Tools medium, which is speed and flexibility. So you try to maximize the benefits of each medium is basically what I try to do.
When you're mixing, are you mixing through the console or are you staying in the box?
Depends. once again, that's I have so there's Studio A and B. I have there's a Trident 80 series in Studio A. And it's actually the one I came from Fantasy Studios in LA. It's the one that Green Day Dookie was done on.
Oh, yeah.
So we have that console at the studio, and then Studio B, I have an old TAC matchless, which has been modified. It's got the bus section has API 2520 op amps and Neve output transformers. So the bus section sounds really punchy and good. I know people laugh at me when I say this. I love that TAC console. It's just a punchy, open rock console. I like it almost even more than the Trident. Now it's clunkier, but it really does sound good.
Let me give you some background on that. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I worked for AMEC. I was the sales manager, and I was around for the development of the whole TAC series. And the designer, Graham Langley, was brilliant. Just to show you, we were going to put Jensen transformers in. Or we're talking to Jensen, and Dean Jensen was right next to the office that we had in North Hollywood. So Dean would not sell us anything until he looked at the schematics. I went over there with all the schematics and sat down in front of Dean, who was an electronics genius, and he looked at everything. He goes, "Oh, yeah, this guy really knows what he's doing," talking about Graham. And, of course, then we made the deal. But it was one of those things where that whole company was so underrated, and yet the sounds were really terrific, as you're experiencing now. And with a few mods, even better.
Oh yeah, I have a Scorpion and a Matchless. Now the Matchless to me sounds way better than the Scorpion, but man, like most people don't realize that there's like Dan Lanois used the Matchless for years. Like all that stuff he did with the Neville Brothers, like Yellow Moon, all that shit's done on a Matchless.
Huh.
I know that one of the tunes on Nevermind from Nirvana, I think it was Polly maybe or something in the way that was done on a Matchless. Some of the songs on Foo Fighters' Color and the Shape were done on a Matchless. Like it's just a great rock console.
Yeah.
And I mixed John Oates' last record on one on mine, and I bought mine from a guy in Oregon who was a teacher at a music school, and he had done the mods himself. And like I said, mine's clunky. It's got a couple little things, as do all consoles from the early 80s, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But man, when it's running, it really sounds great. And to talk about drum sounds, unbelievable. Because sometimes to me, the Trident is almost a little too smooth.
Yeah.
Like my hero for drum sounds is like Bob Rock.
Yeah.
Like all of those big drum sounds, so like I feel like I can actually get closer with the Matchless than I can with the Trident.
Yeah. Very cool. So when you're in the box, do you have any favorite plugins?
Yes. I'm just trying to think of what they are now because it's like it becomes so second nature. I got to say, I still to this day use the Waves SSL plugins like they're going out of style. It's like one of the only plugins that I don't know if I could mix without it. Like it's just because, and I know that they sound once again a little papery. They're not super smooth sounding or whatever, but they just do a thing. I really love the McDSP stuff. I think that they make fantastic plugins. I think that their console strip with the graphic EQ or whatever, the graphic, but I guess it's the graphic EQ. That is awesome. Their multiband compressor is awesome. I love. I'm actually sitting right here. Let me look at my my plugins and see what I'm loving. There's a couple of things that I've been using lately that really add a little something that I'm really surprised at how much I've been using lately. And some of it is like the Plugin Alliance stuff, like it's their harmonic. I think it's called a VC3 or something. It's a yellow box or whatever. You start throwing that thing. Like I had to watch a YouTube video on really how to use it correctly, and then once I did that, man, you start throwing that thing around it, on a couple of things. You can even put it on the whole mix, and it'll make the whole mix sound more alive. It's really, but it really is like salt. Like if you put too much of it, it'll ruin the whole thing.
Yeah.
But It's a great plugin, and I love. I've been loving a lot of the Sturgis stuff. I think that their stuff is super heavy-handed, but I think that their BG Mix stuff is great. It's real simple, but it's real great. And their delay called Soar.
Yeah, that's cool.
Man, what a great plugin! It's probably one of the best delay plugins I've heard in years.
Yeah.
I used a lot of the Valhalla reverbs too. I think that they're great for what they do. When I do like music for like movies and stuff, they're which one is it? It's the I have it right here. It's the vintage verb. I almost can't do movie score stuff without it because the reverb is so deep sounding that you put it on strings and stuff. Oh my God, it's great. You know, I'm always on the lookout for great reverb plugins if you know some, because I still use analog reverbs. Like I have a 250 echo plate. I have an old AKG Spring, the one that looks like a microwave.
BX10.
Yeah.
And BX20 was bigger, yeah.
Yeah. There was one that was real tall, and then there's one that looked like an old TV or something, and that's the one I have.
Yeah.
And I bought it from Ani DeFranco, and man, she had them all, and I bought them all from her, and they just sound fantastic. So I use those and I print the reverb, you know. And we have an EMT 122, the plate, whatever, 120.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big one. We have one of those too.
Well, why use a plugin when you have the real thing?
Because the plugin's faster, and it's
true.
more recallable.
Yeah.
Like imagine this. Imagine you printed this beautiful reverb on the vocal, and you go do a mix, and you send it to the artist, and they say, "Oh yeah, I want you to use and fix this line, or I want to recut this line, or whatever on the vocal." So now the reverb is using the old vocal, and they replace it. You have to reprint it, and it's just, you know, and it's not the easy, like the way my studio is set up. It's the stuff's all in a patch bay. I use TT patch bay, but it's not like hardwired. I should do probably what Mike and Ani did, was they had the reverbs like hardwired into the system, where like it became like a plugin, you know?
Yeah.
But mine, I still have to like cross patch everything.
Very cool, Jack. Very cool. Last question. What's the best piece of business advice that you either learned along the way or maybe somebody imparted to you?
One rule that I live by, that I find that if you could just do this, it's sort of like you can't go wrong. And that's say what you mean and do what you say. So many times people, you know, you'll deal with, because like in business, half of it is dealing with people.
Yeah.
So you basically go, or even more than half, 90% of it's people, you know. I mean, there's a lot of people that can do what I do, but it's the business relationships that I forge with people that make me successful. So, but one way that I got there is that I don't flake out, you know, like, so, I mean, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, you know, and I never miss deadlines, but not missing deadlines comes with saying what you mean. Like, don't tell somebody that you can have something in a week if you know that you really can't.
Yeah, sure.
You know, and you can't. So don't say, "Oh, I can have it for you by Friday," but in your mind you're like, "Oh, I didn't really mean to say that." Like, say what you mean and do what you say.
Yeah.
It's a good code of ethics to live by, and you just try to just be as honest as you can, because people will reward you for your honesty. If you tell somebody, "Look, I'm just backed up right now. If you want to work with me, I'd love to work with you, but I can't get you this until then," you know, then they'll respect that and they'll wait.
Yeah, sure.
So that's a good piece of advice to live by, in my opinion.
You can find out more about Jack at jackmiele.com. That's Jack, Jack Miele, all one word, jackmiele.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOInnerCircle.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOInnerCircle.com, or you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Mixcloud, Google Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, and now Radio Public. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOwnerCircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts to new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.